Hey, your video is about to start. I just wanted to remind you that we are trying a new pilot of sorts of live Q&A for lunchtime with myself on Wednesdays at 1 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Probably we'll give it a go for about an hour. We'll see how it goes, if it can go longer than that. If no one's around to watch it, I'll just give you a little bit of um, any kind of information sharing tips I have for that day. Although I think our regular 9 a.m. share is going to be coming out as well. But anyway, I hope to see you there. And another reminder that we have our membership benefactor system that you can join if you want to be a benefactor and receive some of the perks that you get with that at the various levels. Okay. Thanks, guys. I'll see you later. Bye. Good afternoon, guys. I thought I'd share a little bit more about the grid rules and point you right to the SSA page where you can see for it yourself. This sprung up due to a question asking about whether it's more likely to have physical or mental impairments when using the grid rules if you're over 50. Um, in fact, there has to be physical for it to be useful. But the person also mentioned the lack of usefulness of the grid rules when you're under 50, and I find that to be very true. And I thought maybe I would show it to you so you could see what we're talking about if you haven't seen it already. So if you hear any noise, guys, there's some construction going on nearby, but okay. I'm going to try to share this screen. Forgive me if I make this a train wreck. You know I'm not good at it. Before I do that, I think I want to, I don't know, shrink this up or something. I don't know, guys. All right, let me put this here and then do share. Where is the share? Where is the oh, there it is. Remember, you're dealing with me. All right, that's top one. I got multiple screens, as you know, so. Okay, let's see how this goes, all right? I hope you could see it. Okay. So when you look at this page, guys, and this is DI 25025.035, and it's a series of tables or charts, whatever you want to call it. The first one is the 201s and its maximum sustained work capability, limited to sedentary work. So that's if you have an RFC of sedentary as a result of severe medically determinable impairments. Because it's talking about sedentary, you know it has to do with exertional limits as opposed to non-exertional limits, which would include, but not be limited to, mental health impairments. So to get into this chart meaningfully or unmeaningfully, you have to have exertional limitations, because if we don't have exertional limitations, we are up to heavy work. We kind of enter our disability claims with that assumption. And then our medical records give an opportunity to show that we can't do something that vigorous. So if you have an RFC of sedentary, although you don't really know it while you're going through your claim because the SSA determines what your RFC is, but let's say that's the argument you're going on. I am sedentary and I'm going to prove it. And then if I do, this will apply. As you can see, there's advanced age, advanced age, advanced age coming first. Then there's closely approaching advanced age. And then we got our younger individuals, 45 to 49. And if it's even younger than that, it goes down here. So this is just to give you an idea. If you look up here, as we're going through our, 60-year-olds or 55-year-olds, 50 to 55, 55 to 60. So this would be 50 to the end of 54, closely approaching advanced age. Advanced age would be 55 and above. And then, of course, they give you the actual year breakout. I don't know why they don't do it above, but younger individuals that happen to be age 45 to 49 would fall into this area. And again, then they do the 18 to 45. So they do differentiate between 44 and under and 45 to 49, but it's not that meaningful, and I'm going to show you why. And there's a chart, by the way, for light as well as this, and I think medium. Not sure. I'll have to scroll down because it ends up being meaningless, so we don't really focus on it. Okay, so when you're, an older individual like myself, you could see there are a lot of decisions that lead to disabled. One, two, three, four, five, six, seven. Oops, I went too far. Sorry. Was that four? One, two, three, four. Yeah. And the first two are when you have limited or less education. That's pretty low. I mean, didn't graduate high school for sure. Sometimes it's seventh grade, under eighth grade. Um, okay. And then previous work experience. If it was considered unskilled work, and that's a factor determined kind of by vocational principles of that job. If you are over 55 and you have unskilled work and you are limited to no education that would transfer, and you are limited to sedentary work, you are disabled. And that's going to be based all on that physical stuff. Similarly, same thing about the education. But let's say you didn't have only unskilled work in your last 5 years now, but you did have skilled or semi-skilled work. If those skills are not transferable, and that's kind of a question generally determined by the SSA, although we often make arguments on it when we get to the arguing point. But if those skills are not transferable to a job in that sedentary range you could do, you are disabled. So again, even though you could do a sedentary job from an exertional level, if you don't have skills from your prior job, they just don't expect you to adjust enough to gain skills at the new job and do the new job. They just don't hold us to that bar, and we'll be disabled. Now here we bump into, here's an older person, but they're not disabled. Take a look. And that person had, limited education or less. And notice the difference. Skilled or semi-skilled. Yeah, they had a skilled job in the last 5 years. And the difference between these two, skills were not transferable and the person was disabled. Skills were transferable and they're not disabled. So that transferability of skills, which is kind of complicated, it's very hard to explain. I mean, it's very interesting. That will make the entire difference, and that often does make the difference. So it's something you want to pay attention to. Continuing on, we have another disabled path here. It's a path, right? All these disabled are a path to disabled. Here we have this person didn't have limited education, was a high school graduate or more, but the education does not provide for direct entry into skilled work. That usually results, it's not that difficult. If that graduation or subsequent education, college, what have you, is not, and it could be a trade school potentially, if that's not in the last few years, and I don't think they give us a black and white rule, but I've been told if it's not in the last like certainly 5 years, then it's not going to be considered would provide you direct entry into skilled work, even though it provided you a skill perhaps at the time. Um, so if that shoe fits, and if your past 5 years of work, not your education, not your training, but your work was unskilled, you're disabled. If you're, again, stuck with sedentary exertional capacity. Moving on down, we got a non-disabled here. Same thing. Oh, no, this is where the difference is. Um, it's the same high school graduate or more, but this is where that high school graduate or more does provide direct entry into skilled work. And I would say that is generally when it's very recent. Um, I don't know if high school actually would work it out, but if you have, you just got your bachelor's 2 years ago, That might provide it if it's a particular skill. Again, bachelor's can be different, I would argue. I mean, if it's a bachelor's degree in basket weaving, underwater basket weaving, I don't know that that's going to provide for direct entry into skilled work. If it is an accounting degree, bookkeeping, mm, might provide direct entry into skilled work if it's in the recent couple years. Um, And so even if your work that you did in the last 5 years was unskilled, because these skills you learned at that recent job are recent enough and do provide for skilled work like accounting or something like that, you're not going to be found disabled, not disabled. See how that works? These two things. Moving on, we come to a disabled one. We're still in the advanced stage, so we're at the 55 and over crowd. Again, person has an education, but it does, like the one two above, it does not provide for direct entry into skilled work. But the skills that he has from his job, so he can't transfer because of this, because it does not provide direct entry. And he did have a skilled job in the last 5 years, but the skills did not transfer, could not readily transfer to a sedentary job that exists, then disabled. This is like the gospel, guys, the gospel of SS work. Um, moving on down. We're just going to do advanced age, and then I don't know how far we want to go into. Maybe the closely approaching advanced age we'll do too. So again, if you're over 55, you graduated high school, but that high school or that education was far enough back that it would not be it's like it's not current enough to be applicable anymore. The whole skills trade changes so fast. The processes we do things, businesses, software changes, all that kind of stuff, technology, OSHA regulations, whatever, everything changes so quickly nowadays that any kind of education that's more than a few years old, in and of itself, will probably not provide for direct entry into skilled work. So that's a plus for people. However, here we have that same person, skilled or semi-skilled work, skills are transferable. So whatever skills they were could transfer to, let's say it was accounting. I'm just bringing that up because it's at the top of my brain. Um, that might be transferable to let's say he had a job that was light work before. He's now relegated to sedentary due to exacerbated back problems. He didn't have his education is really old. That's not really reflective. But in the recent past, he had a skilled job as an accountant, and the skills were deemed transferable to from a light job to a sedentary job, desk job. He is not disabled, even though he's over 55. And lastly, for advanced age folks, uh, this is going to be another not disabled one, a high school graduate or more, where that education does provide direct entry into skilled work. Again, that probably means it's very recent. And he has skilled or semi-skilled work. And even if those skills of that recent job, when we're talking about this column, we're talking about the last 5 years, even though it was skilled or semi-skilled work, if those skills are not transferable, he's still going to be not disabled. And that goes back to here because that education he just got provided for direct entry into skilled work. So one or the other of these can be very implicating. All right, so going down to closely approaching advanced age, that would be our 50 to 54 years old and 364 days or something like that. Um, we got a couple disableds right in a row. That's when they have very limited education and they come from unskilled work. If they are limited to sedentary work only, they're going to be disabled. Uh, Same thing, but if they have skilled work in their last 5 years, but those skills are not transferable, so they don't really count. They can't be used anywhere else. Disabled. Same idea, but if those semi-skilled or skilled skills acquired at that most recent job in the last 5 years, if those skills are transferable, again, think maybe accountant, not disabled. And I'm sorry, accountants, this is how it's tough for skilled people. When the skills are of the type that can be used in a sedentary capacity. Okay. Now we're on to people with high school or better education, but maybe it's a few years old, does not provide for direct entry into skilled work, and the work of the last 5 years has been unskilled, disabled. Next guy is recent education that does provide for direct entry into skilled work, even if his old work was unskilled the last 5 years, no skills to that work, very simple jobs, not disabled. That's because this is interfering. Again, moving down, this one's going to be disabled, guys. For a 50 to 54-year-old, if you're a high school graduate or more, but it's been distant enough that that education is not going to provide for direct entry into skilled work. And your current job was, even though it was skilled or semi-skilled, but if those skills are not transferable, disabled. Same dude, but with the distant education in the past. So it's not really going to provide for direct entry into skilled work today. Direct entry, meaning not with, all this training. And if his current job, however, used skills or was semi-skilled, and those skills are the type that could transfer to a sedentary job, not disabled. I think you might be getting the picture, right? Next one is also not disabled when it comes to 50 to 54-year-olds, and this is the last one for that age group. Again, this is where going to be not disabled because look at this. The education he had provides for direct entry into skilled work. Again, that's usually pretty recent education. It's going to be not disabled even if the skills he used at his most recent job, and they were skills, and they weren't unskilled. If those skills are not transferable, he's still going to get to be non-disabled because of his ability to use his education for direct entry into skilled work. Here we have our younger individuals, the 45 to 49. You're going to see here, I just want to make sure I'm counting it right. Only one, this is why we say it's kind of useless. Only one area where a person of that age with a physical impairment to sedentary, and based on that physical limitation alone, will be able to be found disabled, even though he could do, from an exertional standpoint, sedentary work full time. He's got to be illiterate. And the job he had in the last 5 years has to be unskilled. So there has to be no skills that he could then feasibly transfer and be illiterate. And then he's disabled. And all the rest of these guys doesn't even matter. Not disabled. That's why we say under 50, it's kind of useless. Um, there's not that many illiterate people, and I think in recent years uh, they weren't really giving a lot of credence to, well, I came from another country and don't speak English and haven't made myself speak English, therefore I'm illiterate. I think they got away from that allowance. Um, I guess the theory being learn English. Okay. And as you see, as we go down further, 18 to 44, check it out. This whole square here, there's not a single avenue for disabled. They're all not disabled. So when we say we mean 50 or above, this is why, guys. This is the chart. And that's the sedentary one. And I just want to point out to you that here we have the one for light work. You go down to B, this is section 202, maximum sustained work capability limited to light work as a result of severe medically determinable impairments, MDIs. You can see when you go through this, I won't go through it now because I don't want this to be too long. I know this can get very dry. Um, the 55 and above crowd still has 1, 2, 3, 4. So even at the light, which means he can do a lot more than someone sedentary, he can be on his feet for 6 to 8 hours. He can lift 20 pounds occasionally. That guy or gal still has 4 avenues of being found disabled. And I'm not going to re-explain these because you guys have heard all these terms now. So you can kind of go through it if you think, well, I might not be able to get sedentary, but maybe I could get light. If you're over 55, it's still a good chance at light if you have your goods. But when you get down to uh, closely approaching advanced age, the 50 to 54 plus, right? It is becoming limited. Look at this, guys. There's disabled here and nowhere else. Unlike at the sedentary level, when there was a few avenues, here we have one path to disabled as a 50 to 54-year-old if we can do sedentary work. I'm sorry, light work. If we can do light work, you're going to be found not disabled unless you are illiterate and your job in the last 5 years was unskilled or no work. No work is the same as unskilled because there's no skills that could be garnered for a different position that would be light. So that's the only one, guys, as a 50 to 54-year-old. That's why 50 to 54-year-olds have to be able to prove that they are limited to sedentary. They could not do light on a full-time basis. Whereas a 55 and above person, if they can prove that they are limited to even light work, doesn't have to be as bad as sedentary, they have a lot more avenues. You have to prove everything else, of course, and have the medicals. But that's how it is. I hope that's kind of explaining it, guys. And I want to see, did they have something about, yeah, they do have something about medium, but yeah, it's almost pointless because